This is Billa Rajendra, lecturer in English, Government Degree College, Mantani, District, Peddapalli. Today, we are going to discuss about the topic of changing, that means the transformation of sentences regarding to the voice. That means active voice to passive voice. And active voice and passive voice, that means there are, as we know that there are some there are parts of speeches are there in English language, and for the parts of speeches we are going to learn about at first while we are changing active voice to passive voice. So before going to learn about the active voice and passive voice, just we have to know what is active and what is passive voice in sentence of English language. So the change of the one form of a sentence into another form without changing the meaning of the original is called the transformation of the sentence. So transformation of the sentence is while we are changing a sentence into one to another form, without changing the meaning of the original sentence should be called transformation of the sentences. So before going to learn about the active voice and passive voice, just changing a transformation of the sentences, we have to go through with the active and passive voice at first. What is active and what is passive? Define the voice of the verb are. The voice of the verb is whether it is active or passive we have to define. And differentiate active voice from passive voice. So what is a differentiation? We can see here. In this video lesson, we would like to learn from the objectives and convert an active voice sentence into passive voice sentence. How to we can convert into active voice to passive voice. Convert a passive voice to active voice. We are not going to learn about that. Then move on to the next. What is the voice of the verb at first? What is the voice of the verb has to be understood according to the sentence. In traditional grammar, voices of verb is defined as the quality of verb that indicates whether its subject acts or is acted upon. It has two types, that is active voice and passive voice. In traditional grammar, voices of verb is defined as the quality of verb that indicates whether its subject acts or is acted upon. So here we can understand the voice of the verb is most important for recognizing the active voice and passive voices. So here, what is going to explain this active to and passive voice means it defined the quality of the verb. Verb is defined as the quality of the verb, and that indicates whether its subject acts or is acted upon. If it is acts, the subject is acts, it should be passive. And the subject is acted upon, it should be, subject acts, it should be active voice. And the subject acted upon should be passive voice of the verb. So what is an active voice? Go through with active voice. The active voice is the normal voice that this is the voice that we use most of the time. So all the time we use active voice. All the time we use active voice for normal sentences. In the active voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. In active voice, the subject receives an action of the verb. An active voice is normal voice. This is the voice that is used most of the times. In active voice, the object receives the subject Action of the verb. Malin mailed the letter. Malin mailed the letter. Look at the sentence for recognizing the parts of the speeches. Subject is Marlin, verb is mailed, object the letter. So why it becomes an active means Merlin mailed the letter. The subject of this sentence is doer, and the object of the sentence is receiver. So object of the sentence is receiver, it should be active voice. For example, the dog jumped on to the boy. The dog jumped onto the boy. The dog is subject and is doing the jumping. Dog, what is dog doing here? Dog doing jumping, it is the doer. And onto the boy is object. Onto the boy is object means it is the receiver. Receiver of the action. Receiver of the verb. Receiver of the action. Christy will give a book report to the class. Christy will give a book report to the class. Christy is the subject and doing verb is Christy is doing. The verb to the class is object. To the class is the receiver here. And go through with some more examples. He ate a mango. He ate a mango. He is the subject here. Ate is the verb. A mango is the object. In the sentence, ate is the transitive verb, and it has the subject like he and an object mango. The verb tells that what subject it does. The sentence gives a prominent place to the doer of the action, and so the sentence in the active voice is in the way. A verb is in the active voice when a person or a thing donated by the subject doer does the action. So the above sentence that can be written in another way, like a mango was eaten by him. A mango was eaten by him. And in the above sentence, was eaten shows that something is done to the subject. And the sentence gives the prominent place to the subject of the action. So the sentence in the passive voice. So a verb is a passive voice when it shows that something done to the person or thing by the subject. And now we will learn how to convert an active voice to passive voice. There are simple steps that you have to remind. Move to the active sentence, direct object into the sentence of the subject slot. So look at the sentence here. Active voice may you have to do subject. There are sentences to change in active voice to passive voice. First of all, you have to recognize in the sentence what is the subject. Subject means doer of the action. Subject means the doer of action. Receiver, that means the object means the receiver of the action. Object means the receiver action, and try to know that which one is that means about verb form. Try to know about the clear idea of verb form. Subject becomes object. Subject has to become the object. Subject has to become the object. So subject becomes the object. Then object should be denoted with preposition by. Object is denoted with the preposition by. Then verb pattern has not to be changed. That means verb becomes, again try to know that object becomes the subject. Object becomes the subject. Then verb becomes be plus past participle of the past participle of the verb, and all the time if you want to change active voice to passive voice, try to go through with the changing of the verb form in a way. Be fam has to be written, then past participle of the verb form should be written in this way. Marlin mailed the letter. Marlin mailed the letter. That means move the active sentence of the direct object into the sentence subject slot. That means, first of all, we have to recognize the active voice sentence in a way of subject, verb, object. Here, Marilyn is the subject, mailed is the verb, the letter is object. So, direct object should be the subject in the passive voice, the letter. Direct object should be passive voice in the letter. Then direct object should be passive voice in the letter. Then next go through with the verb position or the subject position. The place of the action, active sentence of the subject into the phrase, into a phrase beginning with the preposition by. All the time you have to, subject has to be made as an object with the preposition by. So we changed the letter direct object as subject. Then the subject has to become the object with the preposition by, because he is the doer of the action and the subject is the receiver of the action. So changing of the voice may be in a way that we can understand. We are going to change the receiver in the as a receiver, and doer is doer, but receiver has to be placed as subject and doer has to be placed as object. So next we'll go through with the verb form. Add from the auxiliary, add a form of the auxiliary verb be to the main verb and change the main verbs. So Merlin mailed the letter. It's a past sentence. So it's a past sentence. Just we have to go through with the past participle of the verb mailed, mail. It's okay. Then be form has to be added here, and the letter was. Why? Because it's a singular. Letter was letter is singular verb, singular sentence, singular word. So for the singular, we have to go through with the past tense of the be form, that is verb, that is was, and it is what we can say be auxiliary. The letter was mailed by Marlin. The letter was mailed by Marlin. And take another example. She wrote a letter. She wrote a letter. A letter was written by her. A letter was written by her. And try to identify another important thing is that while you're changing active voice to passive voice, subject of the pronoun has to be taken for pronouns. And she is a pronoun in this sentence. We are explaining it. She wrote a letter. And the subject is she is changed as according to the pronoun. A letter was written by her. Like this, we have to change. Be is added according to the sentence of the verb form. in the voice. Okay, look at another one. What is the passive voice? What is passive voice? The passive voice is less usual. In the passive voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. We use the passive voice when we want to make the active subject more important. So the letter was mailed by Merlin. The letter was mailed by Merlin. The letter is the subject. It's the receiver of the action. Was mailed. Was, that means be auxiliary is usually here for denoting the verb form for passive. And object is denoted by the preposition by Merlin. So passive form should be like this. For example, the boys was jumping on the dogs. The boys was jumping on the dogs. And here we can change the sentence. The dogs was jumped. The dogs was jumped onto the boy. And boy's example by being and was being. Boy was being jumped on the dogs. A book reports will be given by Christie. That means for passive voices, we had seen the examples. It is the passive example. The boy was jumped on by the dog. The dog was jumped on the boys. The boy was jumped on by the dog. And Christie given a book. A report will be given by the Christie to the class. And look at the voice of the verbs. That means before going to learn about the voice of the verbs, we have to go through with the tense and the be forms. For simple present tense, we use the be forms like is, am, are. And for present continuous tense, we use is, am, are, and being. Being is reported here. Why? Because the verb should be in the past participle. So for continuous tense, we use being. And perfect tense, simple perfect tense, present perfect tense should be denoted with has, have, then been is used for verb form for past participle of the sentence. The next, we'll move on to the simple past. Simple past for be form, so it should be was, were. And past continuous, we use was, were plus being. And for past perfect tense, had been. Whether it is singular or plural, whatever it may be, we use had been. For simple future, will or shall be. Will or shall be. So, if you can ask me like the sentences which we are not able to change. Perfect continuous sentences may not change according to the sentences. And for simple future, in the present tense, we go through with the simple present tense and present continuous tense, and perfect tense, present perfect tense. And for the past tense, we can go through with the simple past tense and past continuous tense, and the past perfect tense. And for future tense, we can go through with the simple future and future perfect tense. That means there are no perfect continuous tense for the active voice to passive voice. We cannot change the sentences into active voice to passive voice as perfect continuous tense in this present as well as in the past. And for the future, that means future tenses, we are not able to change the future continuous sentence as well as future perfect continuous tense, as well as future perfect continuous tense. Look at the example for the present tense of the simple present tense. He repairs the radio. The radio He repairs the radio. He is the subject, repairs is the verb, the radio is object. The radio is repaired by him. Verb is used in the past participle. She writes novels. Novels are written by her. For simple present continuous, present continuous. Sarita is going singing a song. A song is being sung by Sarita. Is being used here by because of a continuous tense. It is used being. The boys are making kites. Kites are being made by the boys. Kites are being made by the boys. And for present perfect tense, he has cut the tree. He has cut the tree. The tree has been cut by him. The tree has been cut by him. R.K. Narayan has written many novels. Many novels have been written by R.K. Narayan. Many novels has been written by R.K. Narayan. Look at the past sentences. Simple past. She broke the glass. She broke the glass. The glass was broken by her. The glass was broken by her. And look at the second sentence. He built 2 houses. He built 2 houses. 2 houses were built by him. 2 houses were built by him. And past continuous tense. Pratima was singing a song. Pratima was singing a song. A song was being sung by Pratima. A song was being sung by Pratima. And the carpenters were making chairs. Carpenters were making chairs. The chairs were being made by the carpenters. The chairs were being made by the carpenters. And look at the past perfect tense. He sent the parcel. He had sent the parcel. He had sent the parcel. The parcel had been sent by him. The parcel had been sent by him. Jim Corbett had killed many tigers. Many tigers had been killed by Jim Corbett. And for simple future, I shall punish you. I shall punish you. And for changing of the passive voice, you will be punished by me. Yeah, we use the pronoun here. You will be punished by me. Next, he will send book tomorrow. He will send book tomorrow. The book will be sent by him tomorrow. The book will be sent by him tomorrow. In future perfect tense, they will have completed the work by tomorrow. They will have completed by the work by completed the work by tomorrow. The work will be have been completed by them, or the work have been completed by tomorrow. You can use by them or by tomorrow. Tomorrow is a predicate that can use the sentence. By the next year, they will have constructed the house. By the next year, they will have constructed the house. The house will have been constructed by them next year. You can use by the name next year or by next year. So like this, we can see the sentence structure of the sentence. And again, once again, look at the voice and the verbs. Voice is the form a verb takes to indicate whether the subject of the verb performs or receives the action. There are 2 types of the voices. Again, we can say active and passive. For active, indicate the subject of the verb is acting, because the subject is does or acts upon. The verb is in such sentence, the sentence said to be in the active. And for active voice, you can see the examples. The subject is doing the verb's action. The dog jumped on the boy. The dog subject is jumping on the boy. And Christy will be report. Christy will give a report to the class. Christy is the subject and doer is doing with verb. The computer ate my paper. The computer Computer is a subject and it is a doer of the passive voice. For passive voice, the subject and object has to be like a flip-flop. The subject becomes to the passive recipient of the action because the subject is being acted upon and or is he passive. Such sentences are said to be in the passive sentence. Look at the examples. The subject, the boy was jumped on. The boy was jumped on by the dog. Boy is the subject, was being jumped on the verb. A report will be given by Christy to the class. The report will be given is the report of this subject and will be given is a verb form. My paper was eaten by the computer. My paper is the subject here and was eaten by is a verb. And reasons to use active voice to passive voice. Most of the writers prefer to use active voice because it is more direct. So while we are comparing the weight dropped tray food, the tray of food was dropped by the waiter. And look at the examples. And reasons to as active voice means most of the writers they can compare the active voices. And the active voice is evoked clearly. The states the relationship between the subject and action, like comparing, like passive and active. Your request for funding has been denied by the review of the committee. Review committee. The review committee denied your request for funding. The active voice of the sentence of the propels that the reader forward through the writing, thus avoiding the weak prose. When to use active voice to passive, when to use passive voice means, in general, passive voice is less direct, less forceful, and less conscious than the active voice. Use the passive voice in the following situations. Use the passive voice when you do not know or do not want to reveal the performance of an action. Use passive voice when you want to emphasize the receivers of an action. Then examples. Avoked passive. My bicycle was repainted by John. Deliberate passive. My bicycle was repainted. The performer is not mentioned and by John. Look at the performer. My bicycle was repainted by John. The performer is not mentioned in deliberate passive and emphasizing of the on the subject bicycle. So forms of the active voice and passive voice of the verbs. The passive voice requires a double verb and will always consist of a form of the verb to be, and the past participle usually the en, ed, t from the another verb. Examples. John baked the bread. The bread was baked by John. Was is a form and of the verb for be. And writers should be familiar with forms of to be, often called linking verbs, so that they can easily identify the passive voice in their work. Like a review of the forms, we can say go through with the be forms to be, is, sorry, am, is, or, was, were, being, been. And forms of the passive verbs, note that to be example is kicked, was kicked, is being kicked, has been kicked, was being kicked, had been kicked, is going to be kicked, will be kicked, can be kicked, should be kicked. Then often passive voice sentences will be contained by phrase indicating who or what performed the action. The passive sentence may easily transform into active voice, active sentences when the subject of the preposition by is not moved and is moved to the subject of the preposition in the sentence. Though, and for example, we can see the cookies were eaten by the children. The children ate cookies. The cookies were eaten by the children. The children ate the cookies. The tunnel are dug by the graphers. The graphers dug the tunnel. So it is easy. And do some practices. Change the sentences below into the active voices. The statue is being visited by hundreds of the tourists every year. Hundreds of the tourists visits the statue every year. My book was stolen by someone yesterday. Someone was stolen. Someone was stolen my book yesterday. These books had been left in the classroom by a careless student. A careless student had left the books in the classroom. Yes, in the classroom. Yes. Coffee is raised in many parts of Haveli by the plantation workers. The plantation workers is raise coffee in many parts of Haveli. The house had been broken into by someone while the owners were on vacation. Someone had broken the house while the owners were on vacation. Look at the answers. Children cannot open these bottles. Change into the sentence of the passive voice. Children cannot open the bottles easily. These bottles cannot be opened by children easily. The government built a road right outside her front door. A road, a road was built by the government outside of her front door, right outside of the front door. Mr. Rose broke the antique vase as he walked through the store. The antique vase was broken by Mr. Rose as he walked through the store. When she arrived, the changes amazed her. The changes amazed her by when she arrived. The construction workers were making street repairs all the month long. Street repairs were are are made by the workers, made by the construction workers along the month. From this, I would like to conclude my session, and thank you for being with me.